So home prices and rents, believe it or not, could get a whole lot worse than they are right now. So I'm going to start off this video by showing you guys another video that I put on my TikTok 2 years ago that ended up going viral. Here it is. Okay, this is the truth about Vancouver real estate. And don't shoot the messenger, because shit's about to get real here, okay? The market does not care that you can't afford to buy a home here. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling it like it is, okay? You are not only competing with the people who live here to buy a home, but you're competing with millions of people across the globe who want to live here. Did you know there are 350,000 Canadian residents who live in Hong Kong alone? Just in Hong Kong, right? Everybody wants to live here. It's a privilege to live in Vancouver. It's not your right just because you grew up here, right? And if you're not gonna work your ass off to save up a down payment, and I'm not saying it's easy, but not finance a $70,000 car, live frugally for 5 to 8 years, and do all of those things to save up the down payment, to buy the house, there are millions of people who are doing those things right now to come and take your place in the market. And honestly, I foresee a time in history where a lot of people who live here now will be forced to move out because rents will keep increasing, the price of real estate will keep going up. Maybe it'll come down in the short term, I don't know. But there are homes in New Brunswick for $150,000 that have these people's names on it, right? And you only need $8,000 to buy one of those houses, but why doesn't anybody do it? Because New Brunswick sucks, man. Everybody wants to live here. No offense to people who live in New Brunswick. I'm just telling it like it is, man. So I put out this video sometime in September 2021, and this is actually the video that ended up blowing up my channel, by the way, because it drew so much controversy. I got so much pushback. It was met with a ton of hate and a ton of pushback, but obviously 2 years later, rent is up 40%, prices are up like 40%, and interprovincial migration is at all-time highs. People leaving Ontario and BC to go to Atlantic Canada, which, you know, New Brunswick and Alberta, of course. So pretty much everything I said in that video ended up becoming true. But the most common pushback I get when I make these videos, because I've made quite a few of these videos somewhat similar to this, is that, well, what are all of the plumbers, nurses, Starbucks baristas, and people who work at cafes and fast food joints, what are all of them going to do? If rent and home prices keep going up, they won't even be able to afford to live in the city, and then, you know, all these workers are going to leave. We won't have anybody to serve you coffee and food, and society as we know it will collapse. They didn't say that last part, but basically this is the exact comment that I've gotten like literally over 1,000 times on my channel. So I want to explain to you guys why it's very possible rent and prices can go up, and these types of jobs will remain within the city. So the first thing I'm going to bring up is that units, condos will continue to get smaller. We've all seen those videos of like a New York apartment that's like 150 square feet, but the rent is like $5,000 a month. Developers are making their units smaller and smaller and smaller every single year. Just last year, there was a project in Surrey Central that I will not name. They launched. They had to take the product back off the market. They revamped all the floor plans to smaller floor plans. There's more units in the building now. And by doing this, they are hoping that they can increase their absorption rate, which is basically the rate at which the units are selling through in that project. So they want to sell those units quicker. They do that by building smaller units so they can decrease the price. Now, the caveat to this is that the price per square foot goes up. So your bang for buck and your value goes down, but the actual price of the unit goes down as well, making it more affordable for the majority of people. And not only does the price go down, but the amount you can rent these units out for also goes down with it. So by building smaller and smaller and smaller units, they can keep rental rates lower and prices lower while they're actually theoretically going up price per square foot. And there's a lot of ways they can actually continue to make these units smaller by, you know, getting rid of balconies. They can make appliances smaller, the fridge, the dishwasher, the stove, the laundry. You know, they make dishwashers now that are literally just a drawer. It's like a drawer dishwasher. They could probably get rid of the microwave if they wanted to. They can make the stove smaller. There's a lot of ways that they can add more space, or sorry, get rid of space within that unit. So in the future, a 600 square foot one bed, which is tiny by baby boomer standards, could end up being a massive unit in 10 years. The second thing is that roommates splitting rental costs, or sorry, people splitting the rental costs by getting roommates is going to increasingly become more common in the future. In New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, Hong Kong, it's not uncommon for 2 to 4 people to be living in a space that is supposed to suit 1 to 2 people, or which would suit 1 to 2 people by our standards. Like, for example, 2 people living in a 1-bedroom condo with bunk beds in the 1 bedroom or a bed in there, and the person who gets the bedroom pays a higher portion of the rent, and then, you know, a pull-out sofa in the living room that the other person can sleep on. And I've even seen pictures of places for rent in San Francisco, like a 1-bedroom condo with like 3 bunk beds in the 1 room. So you could have, you know, rent goes from $3,000 a month to $4,000 a month in the next 3 years. And maybe the plumbers and nurses and Starbucks baristas can't afford that anymore. So what they do is 2 of them live in that same space and split the rent. And now it's $2,000 a month instead of maybe one person paying $3,000 a month. And this is what a lot of the immigrant population coming to Canada is already doing and what they have been doing. It's just not normal practice for the people who grew up here, but the immigrant population coming here have no problem splitting, you know, a 2-bedroom condo between 4 people or a 3-bedroom townhome with 5-6 people living in it. And I think this will become more and more common, which will allow the rental rates to continue going up with people still being able to afford to live here. And the fact is, as long as rents are going up, eventually rents will go up to a point where the purchase price becomes justifiable for investors. And now investors can start buying investment property again, which will bid up the price of real estate. So how is it possible for people who have a normal 9-to-5 job to continue living in Vancouver if it gets more expensive? Well, I just gave you 2 ways that there's still a lot of room for rents and prices to go up. And the third way, which is just normal supply and demand. Supply and demand will ensure that wages go up enough to make sure that those workers can afford living in the city. What ends up happening is a bunch of those workers will actually leave the city because they can't afford it. But then Starbucks, you know, plumbing companies, the hospital, all these places will, you know, they can't find anyone to hire. So they're forced to raise wages, and then they'll just pass those costs down to the consumer. I don't know what the hospital is going to do about it, but specifically Starbucks, plumbers, they'll raise their prices. They'll raise the amount that they're paying these people, and they'll attract new employees into the company. So a coffee in Vancouver could end up being $12, but I definitely don't foresee workers leaving Vancouver as being a long-term issue. It could be a short-term issue, but then supply and demand will likely balance it out and fix it. And every time that I make this video and talk about this, people get mad at me like I'm rooting for this to happen. I'm not rooting for this to happen. This is just what has happened in other cities. And I'm just telling you guys that this is a complete possibility, that there is probably a lot of room for the situation to get a lot worse than it already is. And I think it would get a lot worse before we're ever talking about me not being able to buy a coffee in Vancouver. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm 𝐕𝐈𝐃𝐄𝐒, and I'm making moves to move you. Peace.